The phone rings late at night. Debbie Reynolds, America's sweetheart, is calling her best friend Elizabeth Taylor, frantic because her husband Eddie Fisher hasn't come home. Someone finally picks up, but it's not Elizabeth who answers. It's Eddie Fisher himself, Debbie's own husband, calling from Elizabeth's bed. And what Debbie said next would become the most legendary line in Hollywood scandal history. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind. It's 1958. Dwight D. Eisenhower is in the White House. The space race is heating up after Sputnik shocked America, and families are gathering around their new color television sets to watch I Love Lucy reruns. Teenagers are swooning over Elvis Presley, gas costs 25 cents a gallon, and drive-in movie theaters are packed every weekend. Hollywood is still reeling from James Dean's tragic death 3 years earlier, and the studio system is beginning its slow collapse. In the midst of all this, a 26-year-old actress with legendary violet eyes is at the center of the biggest scandal in entertainment history. She's just stolen her best friend's husband. The tabloids are calling her a homewrecker, and religious groups are condemning her from coast to coast. Her name is Elizabeth Taylor, and she's about to film what will become her first Academy Award-winning performance while nursing a broken heart and facing death threats. When most people think of Elizabeth Taylor today, they picture glamorous diamonds, 8 marriages, and tabloid headlines. But here's what might shock you. Behind the scandals was a woman of fierce loyalty, devastating loss, and surprising compassion who literally saved lives, defied the most powerful men in Hollywood, and carried a genetic mutation that made her unlike anyone else on Earth. Think you know the real Elizabeth Taylor? Think again. Stick around because we've got revelations that will completely change how you see this Hollywood icon. Surprising truth number 1, the phone call that became Hollywood legend. To understand the most shocking scandal in Elizabeth Taylor's life, you first need to know about the great love that came before it. In 1957, Elizabeth married Mike Todd, a loud, extravagant showman and producer who staged some of the most ostentatious events imaginable. For her birthday, he rented out Madison Square Garden, invited 18,000 guests, and had it broadcast live on CBS. The press called Taylor a gold digger, but their relationship was genuinely passionate. They welcomed a daughter named Liza, and happiness seemed within reach. But just as Elizabeth began filming Cat on a hot tin roof in 1958, tragedy struck. Mike Todd was killed in a plane crash on the very first day she stepped onto the set. The grief sent Taylor into a complete breakdown. She was devastated, lost, and searching for any kind of comfort. That's when Eddie Fisher entered the picture. Fisher was a famous singer and the husband of Debbie Reynolds, who happened to be Elizabeth's best friend. The three had been close, a tight-knit Hollywood trio. But in her grief, Elizabeth and Eddie grew closer. Too close. And then came that unforgettable night. Picture this. It's late, and Debbie Reynolds is frantically calling Elizabeth Taylor because her husband Eddie hasn't come home. The phone rings, and someone finally picks up. Here's the kicker. It's not Elizabeth who answers. It's Eddie Fisher himself, Debbie's own husband, in Elizabeth's bed. What happened next became the most legendary moment in Hollywood scandal history. Debbie, recognizing her husband's voice and realizing instantly what was happening, didn't scream or cry. Instead, with devastating composure, she simply said, "Darling, turn over so I can talk to Elizabeth." Talk about ice-cold grace under pressure. That single line exposed one of the most shocking betrayals in entertainment history. The public reaction was nuclear. Religious groups condemned Taylor. Fans burned her photographs. She was branded a homewrecker, and the scandal threatened to end her career entirely. But wait, it gets even more brazen. Just hours after Eddie Fisher signed his divorce papers from Debbie, Taylor walked him down the aisle for their own wedding. The woman who had lost everything when Mike Todd died had found comfort in the arms of her best friend's spouse, and she made no apologies for it. The Taylor-Fisher marriage didn't last, of course. By 1964, they were divorced, and the two never spoke again. But here's what might surprise you most. Elizabeth eventually reconciled with Debbie Reynolds. Though they were never as close as before, they maintained mutual respect for the rest of their lives, proving that Taylor was capable of both fierce passion and surprising forgiveness. The real shocker? This wouldn't even be Elizabeth's most controversial relationship. But to understand how she became this fearless, you have to go back to the beginning. Surprising truth number 2, the rebellious child who told Hollywood's most powerful mogul to go to hell. Long before Elizabeth Taylor was stealing hearts and breaking marriages, she was a fearless kid who refused to bow to Hollywood's iron-fisted studio bosses. Born in 1932 in England and raised in California after fleeing World War II bombings, young Elizabeth revealed an outspoken personality that shocked everyone around her. Her mother, Sarah, had once been a Broadway actress, and rumors swirled that she had a romantic relationship with MGM's all-powerful mogul, Louis B. Mayer, the man who controlled the careers of every major star in Hollywood. Here's what most people don't know. While her mother played the diplomatic game, trying to keep peace with the studio, 12-year-old Elizabeth saw right through Mayer's cruelty. She openly despised him, once quipping that he looked like a clumsy penguin who did nothing but crush those beneath him. But the real shock came when Elizabeth was still a teenager. After Mayer insulted her mother during a studio meeting, young Elizabeth lifted her chin high and defiantly told him that he and his entire studio could go to hell. The outburst forced MGM to demand an apology. Elizabeth's response? She flatly refused. You have to understand how unheard of this was. In the 1940s studio system, moguls like Mayer had absolute power. They could destroy careers with a phone call. Actors were essentially property, forced to do whatever films the studio demanded. For a teenage girl to openly defy Mayer was career suicide, yet Elizabeth didn't care. That boldness came with painful consequences, though. At just 12 years old on the set of National Velvet, she suffered a devastating accident when King Charles, the usually gentle horse, threw her to the ground. The severe back injury would plague her with chronic pain for the rest of her life, eventually contributing to addiction to painkillers and more than 40 major surgeries throughout her lifetime. But here's the kicker that'll really blow your mind. Some biographers have claimed that Elizabeth, while still far too young, had a brief relationship with Ronald Reagan when he was already a 36-year-old actor. Though the story remains unverified, it adds yet another layer of controversy to Hollywood's most rebellious star. This wasn't a woman who played by anyone's rules, even as a child. That defiant spirit would define her entire life, and it's what made her strong enough to survive the scandals that were coming. But first, she'd have to survive something even more terrifying: death itself. Surprising truth number 3. She literally died and came back with a message from beyond. By 1961, Elizabeth Taylor had become the biggest star in Hollywood. She was about to film what would become the most expensive movie ever made at that time, Cleopatra, and she made history before a single frame was shot. Taylor became the first actress ever to earn $1 million for a single role, a sum absolutely unheard of at the time. When asked about the record-breaking paycheck, she responded with characteristic wit. "If someone is foolish enough to pay me $1 million to make a movie, I'm certainly not foolish enough to turn it down." But money couldn't save her from what happened next. During filming in London, Taylor contracted a severe case of pneumonia. At first, the studio thought she just had a cold and wanted her to keep working, but her condition deteriorated rapidly. By the time her assistant found her one morning, her face had turned bluish-green and she'd nearly stopped breathing. Hollywood shook with panic. The entire production ground to a halt. Major news outlets actually announced that Elizabeth Taylor had died on set. Newspapers prepared obituaries. The world believed it had lost its brightest star. Doctors performed an emergency tracheotomy in a desperate attempt to save her life. They cut into her throat right there to help her breathe. For hours, she teetered between life and death, and no one knew if she would make it. And here's where it gets absolutely haunting. In the haze of near death, Taylor later swore she had a vision. She claimed she saw her late husband, Mike Todd, the man killed in that plane crash just 3 years earlier. According to Elizabeth, Mike looked at her and said, "It's not your time yet, but when it is, I'll be waiting for you on the other side." Taylor pulled through miraculously, but the tracheotomy left a scar on her throat she'd carry forever, a permanent reminder of the day she almost died. The experience marked her forever. She carried the memory of that vision, that promise of reunion with Mike Todd through all her remaining years. Talk about a woman who couldn't be stopped. Death itself couldn't keep Elizabeth Taylor down, but surviving death was just the beginning. What came next would make the Eddie Fisher scandal look tame by comparison. Surprising truth number 4, the legendary romance that destroyed everything twice. If the Eddie Fisher scandal shocked America, Elizabeth Taylor's next affair absolutely obliterated all remaining boundaries. Remember that Cleopatra movie where she almost died? Well, once filming moved to Rome and Elizabeth recovered, something even more explosive happened on that set. Sparks flew between Taylor and her co-star Richard Burton, a brooding Welsh actor with a voice like thunder. There was just one massive problem. They were both married to other people. Burton had a wife and children back home. Taylor was still married to Eddie Fisher, but that didn't stop them. The magnetic pull between them tore down every barrier, every convention, every shred of discretion. They didn't even try to hide it. The press went absolutely insane. Paparazzi stalked their every move. Religious groups condemned them as sinners, destroying the sanctity of marriage. The Vatican itself, yes, the actual Vatican, issued a public denouncement of their relationship. Politicians called them immoral, but Taylor and Burton made no effort whatsoever to hide their affair. They kissed on yachts, flaunted diamond rings in public, and defied the world's outrage with reckless, all-consuming passion. Here's what might shock you. Burton gifted Taylor a jaw-dropping 69-carat diamond, one of the most famous jewels in the world, insured for $1 million. Due to insurance restrictions, she could only wear it 30 days each year. The extravagance epitomized their love: beautiful, impossible, and ultimately unsustainable. They married in 1964 after both divorcing their spouses. They divorced each other in 1974. Then, because apparently once wasn't enough drama, they remarried in 1975. Then they divorced again in 1976. Their relationship was a never-ending cycle of passion and destruction, love and fury, diamonds and devastation. If you have memories of Elizabeth Taylor or Richard Burton, or if you're fascinated by these old Hollywood stories, please hit subscribe and tell us about it in the comments. We'd love to hear what you remember about these legendary stars. But here's the most heartbreaking part of their story. After Burton's death in 1984, Taylor attended his memorial service, barely holding herself together, and then someone handed her an envelope. It was a letter Burton had written to her before he died. The moment she saw his familiar handwriting, she completely broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. She never revealed the full contents of that letter to anyone, keeping it private and sacred. But she did share one devastating fragment with the world. "Home is where Elizabeth is, and I want to come home." She kept that letter on her bedside table until her final days. When Elizabeth Taylor died in 2011, her casket didn't contain that famous 69-carat diamond that symbolized their love. Burton's widow had sold it years earlier, but Elizabeth's casket did hold something far more precious: Burton's final love letter, the last words he ever wrote to her. It's proof that their love, no matter how broken, no matter how turbulent, no matter how many times it failed, never truly died. Burton's last wife would even purchase the cemetery plots surrounding his grave, a final possessive act that prevented Elizabeth from being buried beside him. But she got her truest wish: to be buried with his words, the only treasure that really mattered. Now here's what nobody talks about. While Elizabeth was making headlines for her romantic chaos, she was also quietly performing acts of genuine heroism. Surprising truth number 5, she saved a friend's life by reaching into his mouth with her bare hands. When James Dean died in that horrific car crash in 1955, Elizabeth Taylor was devastated. She'd been filming Giant with him and Rock Hudson, and when the news came that Dean was gone, the entire set went silent. But the director, cold and unfeeling, forced Taylor to immediately film a reaction scene meant for a sequence with Dean, even though she was drowning in grief. She never forgave him for that cruelty. But James Dean's death wasn't the worst tragedy involving Elizabeth's friends. That horror came later, and this time, Elizabeth was there to fight death herself. Montgomery Clift was a sensitive, brilliant actor and one of Taylor's closest friends in the world. One night, Clift reluctantly attended a party at Elizabeth's home despite feeling unwell. He didn't want to go, but he went anyway because Elizabeth asked him to. On his way home afterward, exhausted, Clift fell asleep at the wheel and crashed his car into a telephone pole near Taylor's property. The crash was absolutely catastrophic. Clift's face was severely damaged, teeth knocked out, his jaw shattered, blood everywhere. Someone ran back to the party to get Elizabeth. And here's where Elizabeth Taylor became a literal lifesaver. She rushed to the horrifying scene in the dark and found Clift barely conscious and choking on something. Without any hesitation, without any thought for herself, she reached deep into his throat with her bare hands and pulled out 2 teeth that were blocking his airway. She literally pulled teeth out of his mouth with her fingers to save his life. Then she cradled his broken, bloody body in her arms until the ambulance arrived. Montgomery Clift survived that night, quite possibly only because Elizabeth acted so quickly. But his face was permanently disfigured by the accident. The handsome leading man was now scarred and changed forever. The accident sent him spiraling into painkiller addiction, erratic behavior, and depression. Hollywood studios, shallow and cruel, no longer wanted to cast damaged goods. They rejected him, turned their backs on him, forgot about him, but not Elizabeth. While everyone else turned away, Taylor remained steadfast and fierce. She demanded that studios cast Clift alongside her in future films. She even offered her own salary as a guarantee to get him work, essentially paying for his career out of her own pocket. She used every ounce of her considerable star power to keep his career alive when everyone else had given up on him. Tragically, fate was merciless. Montgomery Clift died at just 45 years old in 1966, before his chance at a true comeback could ever arrive. But Elizabeth never stopped fighting for him, never stopped loving him, never abandoned him. This wasn't just loyalty, this was the kind of fierce, unconditional devotion that defined Taylor's relationships with the people she truly loved. It's a side of her the scandal-hungry press rarely acknowledged because it didn't sell newspapers. But it reveals who she really was beneath all the diamonds and drama. Speaking of things that made Elizabeth unique, here's something absolutely wild about her biology. Surprising truth number 6. She had a genetic mutation that made her literally 1 in a million. Everyone remembers Elizabeth Taylor's supposedly violet eyes, those mesmerizing, almost otherworldly eyes that seem to look right through the camera and into your soul. But here's the truth that'll blow your mind. They weren't actually purple at all. Taylor's eyes were blue. The legendary violet hue that captivated millions and became her trademark was created through clever makeup techniques and strategic lighting tricks by her publicity team. The studio knew her eyes were striking, so they played them up, used colored lights, specific makeup palettes, and camera filters to create that purple illusion. But that doesn't mean her eyes weren't genuinely extraordinary, because medically speaking, they absolutely were. Here's what nobody talks about. Elizabeth Taylor carried a rare genetic mutation called FOXC2 that gave her an extra row of eyelashes. That's right, she literally had double eyelashes, a condition called dystichiasis that affects less than 1% of the entire human population. This wasn't makeup, wasn't false lashes, wasn't any trick. Those incredibly thick, dramatic lashes that seemed to go on forever were completely 100% natural. She was born that way. When you combine that genetic double lash line with the makeup tricks that made her blue eyes appear violet, the result was a gaze that became the stuff of absolute legend. Every close-up of Elizabeth Taylor, every magazine cover, every moment she looked at the camera, you were seeing a genetic anomaly, something genuinely rare in human biology. But here's the kicker that shows even genetic gifts come with a cost. Those excess lashes sometimes curved inward and scratched her cornea, causing significant pain and potential vision problems throughout her life. Beauty, even when it's built into your DNA, often comes with hidden suffering. This mutation, combined with her undeniable talent, fierce personality, and fearless spirit, created a star who was literally unlike anyone else who ever lived. Elizabeth Taylor didn't just look extraordinary, she was medically, genetically, scientifically one of a kind. But perhaps her most extraordinary transformation had nothing to do with her appearance and everything to do with her heart. Surprising truth number 7. From tabloid queen to life-saving activist. For decades, Elizabeth Taylor's name meant one thing to the public: scandal, 8 marriages, stolen husbands, 69-carat diamonds, and non-stop drama. The tabloids feasted on every detail of her chaotic personal life. She was Hollywood's most famous mess, the cautionary tale, the woman who had everything and threw it away over and over again. But in 1985, an event occurred that transformed her legacy forever and revealed what she was really made of. Rock Hudson, Taylor's lifelong friend and co-star from Giant, was dying. He'd been diagnosed with AIDS, and in 1985, that was essentially a death sentence. When Hudson died that year, it didn't just devastate Elizabeth personally, it awakened something fierce inside her. Here's what might shock you most. While most of Hollywood remained absolutely silent about the AIDS crisis due to stigma, fear, and prejudice, Elizabeth Taylor became one of the very first major celebrities to speak out loudly and publicly. She didn't just make a statement for the press, she took immediate, powerful action. Taylor co-founded the American Foundation for AIDS Research, known as AMFAR, and threw herself into fundraising with the same intensity and passion she'd once reserved for Richard Burton and diamond jewelry. She used her fame, her connections, every ounce of her influence to raise money and awareness. By 1997, AMFAR had raised more than $83 million for AIDS research, a staggering sum that proved both Taylor's incredible influence and her absolute determination to save lives. She testified before Congress. She shamed politicians into action. She forced America to pay attention to a crisis it wanted to ignore. But her humanitarian work went even further than that. Remember that famous 69-carat diamond that Richard Burton gave her? The one insured for $1 million that epitomized their legendary tempestuous romance? Elizabeth sold it, and she used the money to fund construction of a hospital in Botswana to help AIDS patients. She literally sold the symbol of the greatest love of her life to save strangers she would never meet. The image of Elizabeth Taylor, the glamorous star long associated with excess, scandal, and selfish drama, became intertwined with activism, compassion, and genuine heroism. She earned a completely new kind of public admiration and respect, proving that even the most controversial, complicated figures can create profound, lasting change in the world. In her final years, Taylor faced a brutal physical reality that not even her money or fame could fix. Diabetes, skin cancer, heart failure, a brain tumor, the lasting effects of that back injury from childhood, addiction struggles, and more than 40 major surgeries left her hospitalized over 100 times. Her body, which had been so beautiful and so famous, was breaking down piece by piece. Hollywood studios wouldn't insure her anymore because she was too much of a medical risk, which effectively ended her acting career completely against her will. In a tearful interview with Barbara Walters, Elizabeth confessed, "I never wanted to stop making movies, but I had no choice." The woman who defied everyone, who survived scandal and death itself, who saved lives and changed the world, was finally forced to surrender to time and illness. When Elizabeth Taylor died on March 23, 2011, she made sure to have the last word, the final bit of drama, one last moment in the spotlight. Her casket arrived at her funeral exactly 15 minutes late because, as explicitly stated in her will, she wanted to be fashionably late even in death. The gesture left mourners crying and laughing at the same time, grieving and smiling because it was so quintessentially perfectly Elizabeth, a star who lived entirely on her own terms and refused to fade quietly, even at the very end. Which of these surprising facts about Elizabeth Taylor shocked you most? Was it the legendary ice-cold phone call to Debbie Reynolds? Her near-death vision of Mike Todd telling her it wasn't her time yet? Saving Montgomery Clift's life by pulling teeth from his throat with her bare hands? Or her transformation from tabloid scandal into an AIDS activist who literally saved countless lives? Let us know in the comments what caught you completely off guard. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this incredible, complicated, unforgettable woman.